Okay, hi everyone. My name is Sean Cross. I work in the Department of Biostatistics, and I work for Jeff. I mostly do secret projects for him and for the data science lab. And one of those projects is not so secret, which is Swirl. Has everyone used Swirl? No. Okay, that's totally fine. Um, so I guess we'll start with a little Swirl demo. So Swirl takes the R console and turns it into uh, what we like to call an interactive learning environment. So let me just pull up Swirl. So my my there might be some hiccups here because my version of Swirl is like the development version of Swirl because I'm working on new features all the time.
Just gonna
Sure.
just make it bigger.
Oh, sure, that's a good idea. Sorry about that. But the release version of Swirl is very stable. Actually, let me do some things just to make sure that uh, everything is really fine. Okay, so if you call the swirl function, um, we kind of take advantage of the R console, which has kind of a call and response interface anyway. And so swirl is just sort of a loop that displays messages and prompts the user for input or to write a function or to answer different questions. When you log into Swirl, you get this message and it says, "What should I call you?" Everyone has a username. Here, let me just that. Okay. Um, and so uh, there are lots of courses for Swirl. I've written some courses. Jeff is working on a course like this minute as we speak. And some other professors from other universities have written courses. And by the end of this lab, I hope that you guys will feel comfortable writing your own Swirl courses. So when you start up Swirl, it asks you if you want to install a course, and I'm going to install the R programming course, which is kind of just like the first course that we recommend new Swirl users to take. Right now, it takes a little bit to download, but in the new version of Swirl, this is improved. Okay, so this menu shows what courses you have installed. We only have R programming installed, so we'll start that. And so the way that Swirl courses are organized is that we talk about a course really just as a collection of lessons, and the lessons are what the user actually works through. We recommend that lessons are about 20 minutes long so that a student can sit down and like in one sitting finish a whole lesson and not feel like they've been at the computer for a long time. So I'm going to start with basic building blocks. And so Swirl just procedurally walks you through a lesson. So you can see it says 0%, which is a tracker of your progress through the lesson. And the R console just talks to you, just messages keep coming up. So in this lesson, we'll explore some basic building blocks. And so here's a question about using R as a calculator. So we put in the input that it asks us to put in, and we have lots of praise messages that pop up to try to keep people going. Yeah, so this is the first course to just introduce people to R and get them programming. So does anyone have any questions? I know it's like possibly a lot. Okay. Also, like, feel free to interrupt me in general if you don't know what's going on. By just gets you back to a normal R console where you're not interacting with Swirl. I wrote a package called swirlify, which is on CRAN. And just to make sure I have the CRAN version, let me download it. Whoops. So the bulk of swirl courses are written in a sort of a markup format called YAML, which is pretty easy to parse. But let me just I'm gonna post the video for this, of course, and then I'm going to post sort of like a quick start guide for when you guys are writing your own. The assignment is that I've been like filled in a little bit, but the assignment is that you guys are writing a swirl course as an assignment, right? Okay, so I'm going to post. There is documentation online, but I'm also going to post like a quick start guide, so that you can get right into it, because the documentation is kind of verbose. So the swirlify package is always aware of your current working directory. So I like to write my swirl courses. I have a folder where I like just write my swirl courses, but I just sort of made up one on my desktop for my swirl courses. So the first thing is to make sure to set your working directory. Then we should probably load the package. All right, that's fine. And then, sort of like just to review, the way that courses are structured is that you have a course which is just a directory, although some things will go in there, and then within the course you have you have a series of also I'll make this graphic. This graphic is available online, and I'll put a link to it in the YouTube video. Courses are a directory, and the course directory contains a series of directories for each lesson. So you have 2 lessons, lesson 1 and lesson 2, and then the core part of each lesson, where you're actually editing what a student is going to be seeing in the R console, is in a file in each of these lesson directories called lesson.yaml. And so that is like the minimum. This is like the most minimalistic course structure that you can have. You can, but there are lots of different kinds of questions you can ask, and so we'll get into that. So I guess I'll just start writing a swirl lesson from scratch. So the easiest way to do that is with a new lesson, and in the lab we've been talking about how we can teach everyone statistics. So I'll call this lesson, I'll call this course Statistics for Kindergartners, and this lesson will be just like getting started. Okay, so just typing new lesson has set up a lot of things in this directory. So as you can see, if I list the files in this directory, my new course was a course that I was fooling around with before, but states, great, whatever. But stats for kindergartners is this course directory. And swirlify is aware of where all these files are and what the course structure is. So you are so in order to open up the lesson, if you're using like I don't know how you guys like to program in R, but if you're using the command line or you're using the R GUI, the lesson should open up automatically. Or actually working with, it's bizarrely difficult to get it to just open up in a new tab in RStudio automatically. So if you're using RStudio, what you have to do is say file.edit, and then we have a function called LP, which just makes this editing easier. So this is the lesson.yaml file. This is the meat of what your assignment is going to be and what you're going to be creating. So As you can see, it's filled out some things for you, and this is the general structure of YAML, is that so the lesson files are made up of individual questions, and those appear to the user, in sort of a linear order. So each question is demarcated by a hyphen, and then YAML has this like key value structure where the keys are on the left of the colon, the values are on the right, and the first question that's generated automatically when you start a new lesson is this meta question, which the user never sees and really just provides information about the lesson that you're writing. So it's filled some things in, and you should fill in the other information. Okay, so, and of course make sure to save as you're going along. So this is, the package was built with sort of this setup in mind, where you have an R console on one half of your screen, a text editor on the other half of your screen, and you're going back and forth. So there are a series of functions in the swirlify package for writing questions, and they all start with WQ_, and the purpose is so that you can type that and you can see from autocompletion the list of possible questions you can write. So the most simple kind of question you can write is called a message question. So you just put WQ message in the console, and then if you go back to the text editor, it has it all formatted and set up for you. So you can, a message question will just display whatever message you want to show to the user, and they don't have to put in any input or anything else to get it right. This question is always right. As you'll see later what happens if you get questions wrong. So I'll just say, welcome to the class, and save that. And then it's important as you're writing courses to iteratively test them, just to make sure that your questions are formatted correctly, or things, and that your lesson will work. So there's two ways to do that. The first way to do it is with a function called test lesson. What test lesson does is it runs through and really checks the syntax of this lesson.yaml file to make sure that it's formatted correctly. And if it is formatted correctly, that's what you should see. You should just say begin and end testing and no messages in the middle. But like, for example, if for some reason I was fooling around with this and I deleted that T, it would warn me that I'm missing an output key for that question. So the other way that you want to go into your courses is you actually want to get into Swirl quickly and see what the user is going to be experiencing. Right now, the name of that function is test it. In the next version of Swirlify, which if you don't write a Swirl course after this class, won't matter. But in the next version, I'm just saying it's going to change to demo lesson, but there's some things in Swirl that did not allow me to change the name of this function. So if you type test it, you're automatically in the lesson, and you don't have to navigate any of Swirl's menus. So just as welcome to the class, and then lesson complete, because we haven't put anything else. Okay, so let's test. Let's write some more questions. Does anyone have any questions about this? Okay, great. Okay, so let's write some more questions. Probably the most common types of questions that people use in Swirl classes are the message questions, the command questions, and multiple choice questions. A multiple choice question is they all have a similar format. They always have an out. Every question always has an output, which is this initial message that the user sees for that question. And then, as you can see, there's a hint. So if the user gets this multiple choice question wrong, they'll see the hint. The answer choices are the different choices that the user will have to choose from in this multiple choice question, separated by semicolons. And then you specify the correct answer. And the correct answer is really well, let me talk about answer testing first. So Swirl has a series of functions that tests the correctness of answers. And there are different functions for testing different kinds of answers, but the most common answer test you'll probably use is called omnitest, which we tried to make a function that would cover like 80% of cases for testing. So in the case of a multiple choice question, you use omnitest correct val, and as you can see, if you're using swirlify, you don't have to think about a lot of this because it gets automatically generated for you. And so in Swirl, it's possible for users to skip questions. So what you put for the key to correct answer is what will be entered into the console if the student decides to skip that question. So there are situations and there are certain kinds of answer tests where you can have multiple correct answers. And so I'm just making the important point about that correct answer is, the purpose of correct answer is you're specifying what will be used if the student skips a question. And that's important because a student can leave a lesson in the middle of it and then come back to it and pick off right where they started. And so if they use skip in the past, then whatever you put for the correct answer is what they will have, is what will be generated when they resume the lesson. So if you are writing a lesson where you're having the student create multiple variables or graphics or something like that, you kind of have to make sure that there's like a continuity with what you put for a correct answer to make sure that the variables and like the data that they'll be depending on in the lesson will be there if they decide to leave the lesson in the middle and then come back. So that was a lot, but let's get to actually writing this multiple choice question. So the question is like, it's clearly the best state, and we'll have so if I wanted to ask this question, was clearly the best state, and of course it's Maryland, that's how I would set this up. And for a hint, I might write like, okay, so if you wanted to test this, we can go right into test it. This is what the student sees, and they can write, they can do selection 1, or they can actually write empty, and either of those are correct. And as you can see, it randomizes the order that the choices appear in. Okay. I feel like I'm just like, yeah.
So when you added the new question, do you have to save the file in between or something? Because when I tried to say like WQ_multiple,
Sure.
and you have to like click back on the YAML file.
Yeah. So how?
So, by the way, real quick, I'm gonna go by everyone's desk and make sure you guys like have swirlify and everything kind of loaded up, just to make sure everybody's on the same page. So,
Okay. Sure. So I like to use the mouse like as little as I possibly can. So are you using RStudio?
Yeah.
I like to switch back and forth between the console and the YAML file using Control 1 and 2. That's what it is on Mac, but it's probably also Control on Windows. But yeah, every time you change the lesson file, you should save it.
Okay. So it seems to not work if you don't save it in between.
Yeah. Yeah, you should. Basically, every time you change it, you should be saving it. But you can use Control S to do that quickly. Does anyone else have any questions? I feel like I'm just fire hosing information at you. Okay. So let's write some more types of questions.
So let's give 5 minutes, and at the end of 5 minutes, I just want to make sure everybody's got like one question written for their whole course.
Okay. Should I?
Who has a question written for their whole course? So we'll take 5 minutes and write a question. Okay. So I'll check back with you in 5 minutes, and I'll make sure everybody's got a question written for their course. Give me a random question. That's fine. Maybe like 2 to 3.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, so there are several different kinds of questions, and so W command is. I mean, I'll continue explaining how question types are, but yeah, but it's just for like if you want them to write one line of code at the on the command prompt, and then you need to test for that.
You guys figured out the plotting thing?
Which one? Which plot?
I mean, like when you get are there like plot questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh no, Jeff. I figured out there's actually like a type of question that Jeff was like, is this possible? And I was like, yesterday morning, and I was like, I don't know. And like 20 minutes later, I was like, I guess, which is you can just show like LaTeX and Markdown on Markdown. But I had to, Jeff was like, I need this for my class tomorrow. So did he show him? Like, do you go to class?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, okay.
I think he's probably going to be showing me today.
Oh, okay. But yeah, swirl. Swirl is you try to keep it some level of like you can still hack it if you want, but
Yeah.
There's enough that's like stable. That will work.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of like what are common errors. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
What if you wanted to do like a yes no type thing, and if yes, go this route, and if no.
Sure. So the courses are linear right now. Okay. So we don't have branching. Now we thought about it. The problem is that I mean it's not a problem. It's just that if a student like exits a course, you have to remember like what branches they took. But it's something we thought about.
Okay, great.
Sorry. Oh, if you don't see this, it will probably just test.
All right.
I was like, none of the answers are filled in. It's hard to see. Yeah.
No, I mean there's no way to tell that you didn't save your file.
Really?
How do you know data sets?
Sure, I'll.
That was a trick question.
That's like you can, but I can tell you this
Question. I'm not there yet. I'm working on it. Okay. All right. I just had to get that. All right. We try a question. All right. Let's see. is the day? December 9th. And you can do they randomize? Does it randomize the answer choices by default or no?
Yeah.
It does. Okay. Can you make it not do that?
No.
Okay. Well, just because if sometimes
Well, it randomizes the order of all of them. It doesn't randomize the ones that are shown. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, like, if a student wants to, if you want to go through and like test out your thing, like you test it, but it won't. If you want to test it while saving the state that you're in, so you're like, I tested up to question 5, for example.
Sure.
How would you like say, okay, I only want to check like questions 6 through 10 now?
Sure. So you can so test it has just has arguments. So you can say, I just want to test it from.
Okay.
Or you can even say you can specify to a certain question or from a certain question or from a certain question to a certain question.
So, but in the YAML, it's not very clear. Like if I had 100 questions.
Sure.
Like, is it clear? Like I don't know what question number that is.
Sure. So you can do.
Because if I say from, and I don't know what question number it is. Oh, okay.
So you can do find questions, and that this isn't like a perfect solution, but if you do find questions and you type in a regular expression, it will give you the number of questions that match that regular expression. So it might be like a couple.
So like you regex on the output.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's like if you look really clear.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Okay. It's good to know.
Yeah.
Multiple correct answers, you just write the same thing, MD, like for multiple, like if they're correct.
Sure. So for multiple correct answers, you have to use a different answer test. So in fact, I was just talking about this with Jeff because this doesn't work perfectly. Yeah. So I will look into this more, but for now, for multiple choice questions.
So then would you use that for a different type of question then?
Yeah. So for example, this answer test, any of the experts, certainly works with command questions, where you ask the user to put in a single line of our code on the console. And so if it's if the question is create a vector with the numbers 1, 2, 3 in order, and so you can do 1:3. You could do C parenthesis 1, 2, 3 and parenthesis. And so you could test for all of those expressions, and any of them is right. Should I continue?
Yeah.
Okay. So sure. So continuing with types of questions, there's the command question. I don't really want this. Command questions just ask the user for for them to enter one line of code into the R console. So I can say assign 3 to X, and then correct answer. answer is x3, and then in YAML, the octothorpe or the pound sign or whatever you like to call it is a comment, so I'm just commenting that out. Sure, so I'll show you that example. So this is actually something that comes up in the swirl forums all the time, is that people are like, why can't I use the equal sign? This is terrible. And we're just like, well, we want to teach you good style. But if you want to be less oppressive than we are, then I'll show you. No, using equal sign is not good style. The arrow is not good style in your opinion? Really? Wow. All right, well.
The arrow is an old thing that's gone. That will be gone by the wayside.
Okay. All right. Well, next time in lab we'll have 2 lecterns. So assign x to 3. So I'll show you this, and then I'll also show you see, like, that gets upset with you, but you can use any of the expers in this situation. Oh, so another thing you can do in this situation is if you want to say, before I show you any of the expers, if you want to say like calculate 3 squared. So you can say that this is the correct answer, and you can put that as the correct expression, but you can also specify that the correct value is 9. So if people do other things, it will accept their answers. So let me show you that.
Then I would just take either answer.
So then it will take any answer that produces 9. So you can say
Right.
3 times 3. You can say, you could even say, 40 minus 31, like, which doesn't really have anything to do with the answer to the question. But anything that is 9 will work. So, like, if I just put 9, it's fine. Or if I put 3 times 3. If you want to, you can specify another argument here, which is strict, which will yell at the student if they don't do what you want them to do. So, but they still get it right. Oh. I must be thinking of another argument, because there's a way. That's what it is, but what have you? So now let's look at a situation where you only want them to do like a couple different expressions, or that the better situation of this assignment question.
Can you explain what the difference is between correct answer and answer tests? Like, where does correct answer come from?
Sure. So correct answer has nothing to do with specifying what the correct answer, like with testing the student's answer.
Okay.
Correct answer is just what gets entered in if the student skips the question.
So it would tell them what the correct answer was without them having to answer it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and I can show you that.
So
So
it's more of like an output than an input, that correct answer?
yes, yeah. But it also, like I was saying before, it inputs it into the student's history, sort of that lesson, so that if they calculate something important, it's still in their history. So let's test it. Um, and so, as you can see, by using any of x, whereas x equals 3 works, and so does the arrow operator. Okay, so let me,
So question, with
Sure.
that, so say you put spaces or don't put spaces, I mean, do you have to specify all of those cases, or is it smart enough to like figure out?
oh sure, so if you do just this, it figures it out. Yeah, spaces don't matter when it comes to evaluating expressions, but if you're like, there are certain question types like if you're looking for them to enter a particular string, that because you're testing for a string, then white space matters. So let's add another question. So this is kind of a different question. This is a question type where you show a figure. So you can still have a message, and the figure that you the figure will be displayed. However, it is environmentally dependent. So if you're in the R GUI, it will show up in a separate window. If you're in RStudio, it will show up in the viewer pane or in the plots pane. And so this figure, this sourcefile.r is referencing an R file that you write inside of your lesson directory. And that R file will be sourced, and whatever plot it creates will be shown to the user. Figure type specifies whether figure type can either be new or add, and because you might want to build multiple layers on a figure, like if you use plot and then you want to show particular points or something like that, and first you want to explain the plot and then with some output, and then you want to explain the points with some output. So whenever you specify new, it will create a brand new figure, and whenever you specify add, it will build upon the figure that you already are showing the user. And so, as you can imagine, if you try to add and it's like a new plot, it will just overwrite the plot that you had, and with the vice versa case, you can run into some problems. So don't do that.
Can you have it appear in a new window? Because I just noticed now the plot window is too small. Like if you were to try to plot something there, it throws an error that like the margins are too large.
Yeah.
Is there a way to avoid that situation?
Yeah. I mean, we deal with that error. We deal with users having that error a lot, and I don't know off the top of my head how you would force it to display in a new window.
Would that be in the R, like where you're sourcing that?
Yeah. So if there's a way to specify it to display in a new window, like I don't know what that function is off the top of my head, or if it exists, but you could do that in sourcefile.r and it should work. But I don't know how to do that off the top of my head. And usually we just tell people to change their.
Would they have to restart the whole lesson? Like how would that work? If they got an error, because it seems to put the.
Sure, it does. Yeah, they have to restart the whole lesson.
It doesn't save.
It's.
Does it save their
I think I believe it saves their. I mean, it saves their progress from the question afterwards.
So they would have everything up until the plot question.
Yeah, I mean, because they didn't generate the plot, it might mess things up. There might be other things going on in the source file.r that kind of interferes with the continuity of everything they're supposed to have loaded. And so I usually just, when users email me and they're having this problem, I tell them just to restart the lesson and to kind of just like skip their way through, which isn't, it's not a perfect design, but that's the way it is for now. So yeah, so if I go, this is going to be my source file.r, so if I say to make some plot, and then I save it in the lesson directory. You can call this file whatever you want as long as the file name matches what you've specified in the YAML. So actually, I'll change that. I'll call this plot. And then, now this might hiccup because my plotting window is messed up because of the dimensions of this projector, but let's see. Oh, okay. So, as you can see, it plotted my simple nothing plot. Does anyone else have any questions about that? Okay, so moving on to other kinds of questions. Message, multiple choice. So you can ask for the user to write an exact number. It's a pretty simple question format where you have some output and you ask them this template is kind of an inside joke, but let's see if you get it. This is from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but as you can see, you just put an output, you specify some specific number, use honor test with correct val, and it works, and it's pretty straightforward. Oh, whoops, I think oh, of course. Here, actually. Any questions about that? And so we'll do script last. So write question text is, the text questions are like the same thing. Like the exact same as a numerical question where you just ask some question in the output and then you specify a specific string that you want the user to type in. Is it okay if I don't show an example of that? Okay. So then there are video style questions, which the video style questions are actually like, so some of these questions are like more hackable than others, which means that you kind of have more latitude to do whatever you want. So it's called a video style question. I'm thinking about changing this because really it just opens up any URL that you give it. So if you can put in if you put in video link a URL to any web page, it will open it up. But the idea was to use it for YouTube. In fact, Jeff and I were going through this morning, trying to embed YouTube videos in the RStudio viewer panel, and we realized that you can't do it because even though the viewer panel will it will show like Markdown or LaTeX or any kind of math that you want to display to a student, it's not a fully fledged web browser, even though it will show some HTML. So you can't, like, we were thinking it would be cool if you could like have a video in RStudio, but you can't yet. I mean, and that's RStudio. That's on RStudio. Like that's some functionality they need to come up with if they're interested. But so yeah, so you can just say, the output is whatever message you want, and then look, here's the YouTube link. Perfect. That video is was making me really upset. The British Home Office or whatever says, like, if your student or not your student, like, does your child, like, do they like computer programming? Do they have independent teaching materials about computer programming? Like, they might be a cyber criminal. And this just like came out today, and so I'm upset about it. But yeah, so if we test this, and then it just uses the function browse URL to open up a new tab in your default web browser. So depending on like what a user's or student's web browser settings are, that could get weird. But we just count on it not getting weird. Okay, so the most complicated type of question, in my opinion, is the script question. So you might want to ask your students, and this introduces a lot of things. In fact, well, I'll fold it in. By the way, when is this over? 1? Okay, wow. All right. So, okay. A script question, you might want your student to do more than just writing single lines of code into the R console. So you might want them to write a whole R script and to test it. The best use of this the best use of this functionality in Swirl right now is to have students write a function and then to test that function to make sure that it works. And coming up with all that on the fly will take more than 6 minutes. So I'll show you some script questions that I wrote that are pretty simple. So this is a lesson that I wrote as a part of Swirl's canonical courses for testing, for teaching the user like the very basics of writing functions. Okay, so here's a script question. All right, I guess, okay. So, I described the problem here. For answer tests, I wrote my own answer testing. I wrote my own function in order to test the student's answer, and I'll go through that with you. And then I have a hint, and then the key that I specify is the script that I want the student to fill in. So I wrote this boring function.r in my lesson directory, and when the student reaches this question, the boring function.r is opened in the student's text editor. And so if boring function.r contains nothing and you want them to write something from scratch, then that's wonderful if that's how you want to structure your class. So all the scripts that you write that you want a student to fill in, have to be in your lesson directory in another directory called scripts. And so the first function that I have them write is called boring function. So you have to specify, so boring function.r is what opens when a student reaches that question, and then if the student wants to skip that question, swirl will source boring function -correct.r. So I decided to include all kinds of these huge comments to tell them more about how to write functions. In this environment that's like different from swirl, so you can kind of be more verbose, and they see this in their text editor. So all of this explanation is just to tell them to delete the pound sign, and that's how the function will work. And as you can see, the correct version is just without the pound sign. So then the question is, so the last part of this, and I'm really coming under the wire here, the last part of this is how to do this answer testing. So you can write whatever custom tests you want to write, which aren't just specific for, this is kind of like outside the scope of what I hope Jeff wants you to do, but you can write a custom answer test for any question, like for a command question, for anything, as long as you are cognizant and responsible for the engineering that you want R to do in the background to evaluate the answer to that question. So if you're looking for something very specific, it can be useful. So I did, so the answer test I specified is test func1 without any arguments or anything, and so this is the function that I wrote. So if you want to include this, if you want to include script questions in the course you're going to write, I highly recommend looking at this course. If you have questions in general, of course, get in touch with me. But this is how these function testing functions work. So you can use get to just pull out boring function and assign it to func. So this variable func is the same as is a function, and it's the same as boring function. So I just tested 3 different ways that boring function returns whatever you give it, and then this is all within try block, so that if any of this fails, then the user fails they fail the test. It says you didn't write it says whatever I specified in the hint, which is that you didn't write the function correctly, and then you get another try. And so as long as this variable that I created, OK, exists, and all of these things are true, that whatever you put in comes out the same way, then the answer test passes, and the student got the question right. If you want to do this, I'd be happy to work with any of you and to send you pull requests or whatever needs to be done to make this kind of thing work. So that was a lot. So do you have questions about function questions? Okay. So one last thing in the last minute. I got a question about loading data. So right now there is one good way to load data, but it's not the only way that you could load data, but I'll show it to you. I guess to make a broader point first, there's this file. When you do new lesson, there's this file that gets automatically generated. Let me show you in R. Oh, it didn't change this. So when you say new lesson, some files are automatically generated, and one of them is init lesson.r, and at first there's nothing in there. But whatever you put in there is run before your lesson begins. So that would be the appropriate place to load data, to set up any functions you want to use. Whatever R code you want to be executed before the lesson starts, you can just put in there and it should work. That being said, you might want to use code from another library, or you might want to teach how to use a specific library. You can make sure that the user has certain dependencies installed in depends on.txt, which is just a txt file on every on every line. Just put the name of one package, and when the user starts the lesson, if they don't have a package installed, it'll ask them, do you want to install such and such a package? And even, excuse me? So all you have to do is put it on depends on.txt. So like, let me show you, do that. So it's just a blank text file when it's created, but you could say, if you wanted to teach like a lot of Hadley's packages, you could say dplyr, stringer, what have you, and when you start the lesson, it'll make sure that you have these installed. I have them, if you do have them installed, it won't say anything. But if you don't have them installed, it'll ask you, would you like to install such a package? And right now, this only works for CRAN. So if you want them to have, yes, yeah. Okay, so are there any other questions? Anything like that? You mean like where to start? Like, what do you mean by where to start?
Every time we should start from the beginning.
As far as you mean as far as like when it comes to specifying like a specific answer test?
And if we have many questions,
Sure.
then it takes a long time to test from the beginning.
Oh, sure. I see what you're saying. So like, let's say, you have a lot of questions and you don't want to test the whole thing. So this is question 1, 2, 3. So if you just wanted to test question 2 immediately, you can say test it. Oh, sorry. You can say test it from 2, and it starts from 2. No problem.
And if I want to run a bunch of code and show the output.
The output of the code?
Like I want to run an example code and make them see the results.
That's interesting.
We create a plot.
Yeah,
For example.
sure, but sure. So you can use a plot question to do that, but it won't show them the code.
And does it show the output besides the plot?
Yeah, there isn't a way to do that. I'm thinking about it. I mean, there's.
You can't just cat.
You could. You mean just like to the console, or to open it up in a new file?
Either one. Probably console. It's fine.
Sure. I mean, something you could do is swirl. Swirl has a function called play, which stops the lesson, and it saves everything that the user has done, and then they can use the R console however they want, and then you can say. Then you say there's a function nxt, which is supposed to be next, and that will get them back into the lesson. So something you could do is you could you could have a message that say like, I'm going to open up a script file, and I want you to like select all and run every line of the code after you start playing. So then the student would go into play mode, or you would open up the script, the student would go into play mode, and then they could run the code to see all the output, and then they could resume the lesson themselves. That's kind of that's not a perfect solution, but it's something you could do.
What do you mean open up the
Sure. So you could say, excuse me. Yeah. Yeah. So you can include a script. You can include whatever files you want inside of your lesson file, and oh, actually, I was going to do this before. So you can include whatever files you want inside of your lesson directory. So you could do something. You could say to a user, like you could write a command question that says, you're going to write this command question and it's going to open up a file in the text editor. And so this function, I meant to cover this before, I'm sorry. This function right now, and including this in your initlesson.r file, is the best way to access files that you include in your lesson. So, for example, if you write some R script included in your lesson, you can write a command question that says that the answer to the command question is a command that opens this lesson. So you would say like file.end, .path to file, and then the course of the lesson, and then the name of the file inside, the name of the file that you want the user to execute to use. Of course, you could just wrap this file and put that in init.lesson so that they could execute a function without any arguments to make it easier. So then you could have them, that would open up the file in a text editor, and then you could say, go into play mode and execute all of the code in that file. And then when you're finished, type next, and I'll explain the output to you.
Is there a way sort of like you said there are all the generated files, maybe just add a line of cat in there in those files and then run.
Sure. I mean, there's.
I don't know how the structure of the
Sure. I mean, there's no. I mean, as far as I can think of right now, there's no way to like do that in a stable way. But if that's what you like, if that was kind of the idea you were having as part of your lesson, I can write an example lesson where that happens, and then you can modify it. Sure, that would be fine. Sorry, this is done late. Also, if any of you, if you have questions. That's my email address. Feel free to email me with any questions. If I'd be happy to look at whatever code you have. If you could, has Jeff taught GitHub? Is that like, okay? If you develop these on GitHub, that would be really awesome, because in my opinion, that's the best way to collaborate on swirl folders. Okay. It's also, GitHub is the best way to distribute your course once you write it. Yeah, of course. My pleasure. John, do you know how I stopped the recording?
It's up on your panel. Like,